Hi, I'm Jenny. Thank you for joining the Madison Public Library for the Fairy Lantern tutorial. We're going to go over some tips and some ideas, and let's get started. For this activity, the basic supplies that you will need are a new or recycled glass jar, with or without the lid. I used a lid on all of mine. Or you can use a heavy-duty clear plastic cup. And I am going to demonstrate a technique on the clear plastic cup. To frost your jar, you can use a frosted glass spray paint. Such as on this jar, and we'll go over a technique today where you can use tissue paper and Mod Podge. You will need a silhouette for your jar. So I cut out some silhouettes on the Cricut machine at the library. So today we're going to use the fairy cutout. I had other jars with the gnome, knight, the dragon, so it doesn't have to be just a fairy jar. You can also cut out your own shapes on some heavy duty paper. Preferably in a black or a dark color. You can download a picture and cut it out as well. Then your optional decorations are paint and glitter. You can use your plastic florals, twine, ribbon, cheesecloth, or some burlap. And then you will need craft glue or a glue gun for applying your decorations. Now these lights can be lit with your battery operated tea lights or a strand of lights, but make sure that you do not burn a candle in your lantern. So the first thing you want to do if you're recycling a jar is to wash it and then soak it and get all the labels off your jar. Then you want to use some rubbing alcohol and get your jar clean inside and out so that you can apply your silhouettes and do your spray painting or the tissue paper. So if you're using the frosted glass spray paint, you just follow the directions on the can. I used about 2 coats for the look on my jars. You could use more or less, depending on what you want. The benefit to the spray paint, it dries really quickly. You just take your jar outside and do the top half, couple coats, and flip it over and get the bottom. And if you don't want to use spray paint, then you can use tissue paper and Mod Podge. And then if you do that technique, you can even apply your silhouette to the outside of your container. So for most of mine, I actually applied the silhouette on the inside of the glass. And we're going to go ahead. I'll show you how you can use the plastic and the tissue paper and apply to the outside. So the first thing this is an adhesive vinyl, so it's going to stick right to my jar. If you use your cardstock or heavy paper, you can just use some glue or some Mod Podge and you may have to hold it down while your glue dries a bit. So I'm going to go ahead, place my silhouette onto the container, and then we're going to go ahead and just take your plain tissue paper and you're going to just work in a small section at a time. Apply the Mod Podge to the container, and then carefully going to lay down your tissue and try to smooth it out. A little bit of wrinkles are fine. It gives it an interesting look, but try to keep it as smooth as possible. So now I'll just peel it back and add some more. And keep working the tissue paper around the jar. Don't worry, just have a little bit of overlap on the top and the bottom, and you can trim it all up when you're done. Smooth it out. And the other thing with the tissue paper is sometimes if it's wet and you're not careful, it might tear, but that's okay. When you're all done, you can just go back with a little piece and patch up any holes or tears that you have in your tissue paper. All right, so I've made it all the way around. I'm just going to do a little trim, overlap just a little bit. And I'm going to go ahead and trim. And roughly trim the top. And I'm going to go ahead and put some Mod Podge on the inside of the jar. Just fold it over. Then a little around the top. Just kind of work the tissue paper around the top. And when it's all covered, go ahead back and carefully apply a layer of Mod Podge to the outside of the container. That will help strengthen the outside. When you're finished, then just go all the way around the outside of the jar. If you do have any rips and tears, then you can go ahead and patch it up. So that's really easy. Then you don't have to try to reach inside a jar and get your silhouette on. All right, and then once you have that done, it's time to decorate. So for something like this one, it was the gnome. This is spray painted. I went ahead and painted my lid and just added a bit of cheesecloth underneath. Then on this jar, I actually had cut this one out by hand and used glue to glue it to the inside of the jar. I did go ahead and use Mod Podge on the inside of the jar and sprinkled in some glitter on the inside of the jar. You could glitter on the outside as well. Then I just tied some twine around the jar, and with the hot glue gun, I added some floral, and I also just had some moss. I covered the top of the lid with the moss, and then some floral. Now this jar was with the tissue paper, and that is just out of a plastic wine glass, and I ended up, comes in two parts, so I left off the base, but you can always paint it, decorate it. And then I went ahead and took the floral and put it over the top of the wine glass. So to do that, these usually just pull right off the end of the stem, like so. So I pulled out the green bits of the flowers, just pulled the petals off, like so. And then I just snipped the center just a little bit, not enough to cut it apart, and slid it over the top of my jar and all the way down. And I did the same thing with the leaves. If you remove the plastic center and snip it, slide that down too. And then I used just some twine and some hot glue to cover up the rest of the stem of the glass. So like for this one, this cup, where it's flat on the top, you can always take a rounder flower, just pull it off, and hot glue that on the top for your decoration. For this bigger jar, I had the knight, and on the reverse is the dragon. And I went ahead and this was painted with the frosted glass spray paint. And then, just to give it a darker look, I watered down some brown paint and kind of lightly painted that on top of the frosted glass so it looks a little darker. And then I had some hobby grass, and I used the Mod Podge and sprinkled on the little hobby grass. And I simply covered the top with a little piece of burlap and some twine. So that's another option. And then for the last jar, I decided I did the tissue paper and Mod Podge, and I have the unicorn. And since I was decorating the outside of the jar, I went ahead and covered it all the way around. I cut out some grass shape and some stars, glued them to the outside of the jar, did the tissue paper and Mod Podge, and then I decided to go back and put some paint right on top of where the stickers are. So in the daytime, your jar is colorful. I really like the way this turned out. I had some different green and glitter paint. And so I just painted over top of some of the stars and the grass. And then on the unicorn, I had it's called Dragonfly Glaze. So if you can see it, it kind of is very shimmery, and I painted about 2 or 3 coats on top of the unicorn. So during the day, it's a very colorful jar, and then at night, when you put the light in, you still get the silhouette. Really happy with the way that one turned out. And this one, I just had some colorful twine. I tied around the top. The lid was plain, and I kept it that way. You could glitter it, paint it, or you could just leave the lid off altogether. So those are my examples. I hope it gave you some good ideas for decorating your own jars at home.